Charles Cullen was born in 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey. He would become a nurse, but one whose actions would lead to him being one of the most dangerous people in American history. The signs of trouble were there, hidden beneath a childhood marked by trauma, isolation, and mental health struggles. Cullen's childhood was difficult. He was the youngest of 8 children in a working-class Catholic family. His father, a bus driver, passed away when Charles was just 7 months old. Losing his father so early had a lasting impact on him. The pain continued when his mother passed too when he was 17. That loss broke whatever stability he had left. After that, he dropped out of high school and attempted to take his own life for the first time. Cullen later joined the Navy, but was discharged after a series of strange events. One incident saw him sitting quietly in the control room of a missile cruiser, wearing surgical gloves and a mask. This odd behavior only worsened after he left the Navy. Over time, Cullen attempted to take his own life more than 20 times. Eventually, he became a nurse, believing it was a way to help others. However, instead of saving lives, Cullen began to harm them. How did a person who was supposed to care for the sick end up causing harm? Throughout his career as a nurse, Cullen worked at multiple hospitals and a nursing home in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. At first, there were small signs. Patients experiencing sudden, unexplained declines, strange results in lab tests, medications going missing. Yet Cullen always managed to leave before these issues became serious enough to raise alarms. He ended patients' lives by giving them dangerously high doses of medications like digoxin, insulin, and others. Many of these patients were not even near the end of their lives. He later claimed that he was ending their suffering, but that didn't make sense. Many of the patients were not in pain. Some were even recovering. So why did he do it? Cullen confessed that he felt powerless in life, and taking lives gave him a sense of control. He once said, "I thought that people weren't suffering anymore, so, in a sense, I thought I was helping." But this wasn't about helping. It was about causing harm. Why didn't the hospital stop him sooner? That's a question many have asked. Some hospitals did notice strange patterns. There were internal investigations, but instead of alerting the authorities, many hospitals chose to let Cullen resign quietly. The reason? Fear of lawsuits and bad press. They thought it would be easier to let him go than deal with the consequences. This decision allowed Cullen to continue his actions. It wasn't until 2003, at Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey, that Cullen's actions were finally uncovered. A fellow nurse, Amy Loughren, began to notice unusual medication records connected to patients who had suddenly and unexpectedly passed away. She went to the police with her concerns, and they asked her to wear a wire. Amy agreed, even though she feared for her own safety. She befriended Cullen and gained his trust. Eventually, Cullen confessed during a recorded conversation, and the police arrested him soon after. At trial, Cullen admitted to taking the lives of at least 40 patients, though investigators believe the real number is much higher, possibly close to 400. If true, that would make him the most dangerous person of his kind in U.S. history. In court, Cullen seemed detached, almost emotionless. He pleaded guilty to 29 cases in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. When asked why he didn't just leave nursing, he replied, "I couldn't. I had to do it." His trial was quick because he confessed openly. But for the families of his victims, there were still many unanswered questions. One father stood up in court and shouted, "You're evil!" But Cullen didn't react. In 2006, Cullen was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the chance for parole. He received 18 consecutive life sentences in New Jersey and 7 more in Pennsylvania. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. As of 2025, Cullen is at New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, where he will remain for the rest of his life. Before he was locked away, Cullen did make a brief statement during his sentencing. He said, "Your Honor, I apologize for everything. I deeply regret what I have done. I hope that the families can find peace. I do not expect forgiveness." However, for many families, his apology came too late. Cullen didn't receive the death penalty because both New Jersey and Pennsylvania had stopped using it by the time of his sentencing. He will spend his remaining years in isolation under strict surveillance. In fact, after he tried to harm himself in court by repeatedly banging his head against the table, the judge ordered that he be restrained for future hearings. What about a Texas nurse accused of injecting infants with harmful substances in an alleged attempt to gain praise? Janine Ann Jones was born in 1950 in Texas. She was adopted by Dick and Gladys Jones, a couple from San Antonio who had already adopted 3 other children. Dick worked as a professional gambler and entrepreneur, but he faced several business failures. This caused financial stress in the family. As a child, Janine often felt ignored. She had a constant need to be noticed. To get attention, she sometimes pretended to be sick. She also used manipulative behavior to gain sympathy. Things got worse after her younger brother Travis passed away in an accident. Not long after, her father lost his battle with cancer. These events made her emotional struggles even deeper. After finishing high school, Janine first tried a career in cosmetology, but later she switched paths and became a licensed vocational nurse. She married her high school boyfriend, James Jimmy Harvey Delaney Jr. They had 2 children together. However, their marriage was unstable. They separated and got back together multiple times. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Janine worked in the pediatric intensive care unit at Bexar County Hospital, now called University Hospital of San Antonio. During this time, a lot of infants experienced sudden health crises under her care. Many of them didn't survive. Instead of launching an investigation, the hospital quietly asked all vocational nurses, including Janine, to resign. They wanted to avoid any legal trouble. She later took a job at a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas. There it was discovered that she had been injecting infants with dangerous medicine like succinylcholine, digoxin, and heparin. These substances cause serious breathing or heart problems in the babies. It appeared that Janine was creating emergencies on purpose. This allowed her to jump in and try to save the babies, which made her look like a hero. Sadly, many of the babies didn't make it. Why would a nurse do something like this? Janine claimed that she was trying to draw attention to the need for a pediatric intensive care unit in Kerrville, but this explanation doesn't justify what she did. Her behavior points to a deeper psychological issue. It seemed she wanted recognition and control, even if it put innocent lives at risk. In 1984, Janine was found guilty of causing the passing of 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan by giving her a dangerous dose of succinylcholine. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison. Later that year, she was also convicted for harming a 4-week-old baby named Rolando Santos by injecting heparin. That incident led to a 60-year sentence, which was to be served at the same time as the earlier one. At the time, Texas had a law passed in 1977 to reduce prison overcrowding. Because of that, Janine was eligible for early release in 2018 after completing only 1/3 of her sentence. This possibility caused a lot of concern among the public and law enforcement. In response, prosecutors reopened old cases. In 2017, she was officially charged for her role in the 1981 passing of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer. He had been given a toxic dose of Dilantin. To keep her in prison, prosecutors pushed forward with these new charges. In 2020, Janine admitted responsibility for what happened to Joshua. She was given a life sentence. As part of a deal, 4 other charges were dropped. But this agreement made sure she would stay behind bars. Janine is believed to have been responsible for the loss of up to 60 infants and children, but no one knows the exact number. Many hospital records were destroyed, which made it hard to investigate further. The families affected by her actions still carry deep pain. One mother, Rosemary Vega Cantu, whose 2-year-old daughter passed away under Janine's care, said, "I trusted you with my daughter, and you would tell me, 'It's going to be okay, Rosemary.'" Giao was. Janine Jones is currently being held at the Lane Murray Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She will be eligible for parole in 2037, when she turns 87. But because of the seriousness of her actions and how the public feels, it's very unlikely that she will ever be released. The next individuals survived the battlefield, but not her shift. What was happening inside that quiet Massachusetts ward? Kristen Heather Strickland was born in 1967 in Fall River, Massachusetts. She was the older of two daughters in a middle-class family. Her father worked as an electronics executive. Her mother stayed home and taught part-time. As a teenager, Kristen often lied. She tried to control situations. She even pretended to harm herself to get attention. In 1986, she enrolled at Bridgewater State College in Massachusetts. She earned a nursing diploma in 1988. Later that year, she married Glenn Gilbert. They had 2 sons. In 1989, she began work as a registered nurse at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton, Massachusetts. In April 1990, VA Practitioner magazine ran a feature on her. From 1995 to 1996, something troubling showed up at the clinic. Many patients suddenly went into heart failure when she was on duty. She was there for about half of all serious emergencies in her ward. In her last 14 months, 37 people did not survive while she worked. Her approach was to give patients very high doses of epinephrine. A normal dose helps the heart. Too much can make the heartbeat stop. After these injections, patients crashed. Then she often rushed in to help. Prosecutors say she did this to create emergencies. She wanted to impress her boyfriend, James Perot. He was a security guard who also came when alarms sounded. In 1996, 3 nurses spoke up. They noticed more sudden collapses and saw that the epinephrine stock was shrinking. This led to a formal inquiry. During that inquiry, Kristen made anonymous threats to the clinic. She even called in a false bomb warning. In April 1998, she was found guilty of those threats. Her trial opened in November 2000 in U.S. District Court in Springfield, Massachusetts. She faced charges for causing several patient passings and for trying to harm others. The people named in the case included 4 Air Force veterans. On March 14, 2001, the jury found her guilty on every count. Massachusetts does not allow the most extreme federal sentence, but because the incidents happened on federal land, that option existed. The jury chose life behind bars instead. She is now held at FMC Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas. She cried softly when the verdict came in. Her father and grandmothers had begged the jury to spare her more pain. They said a harsher sentence would also hurt her 2 young sons. Up next is a Texas dialysis clinic where bleach injections turned routine treatments into fatal events. Kimberly Clark Sayans was born in 1973 in Fall River, Massachusetts. She later moved to Texas. She attended Central High School in Pollock. In her junior year, she became pregnant and left school after her son was born. She later earned a high school equivalency diploma. Then she got a vocational nursing license at Angelina College in Lufkin, Texas. Her work history was unstable. She was fired from at least 4 healthcare jobs. In one position, she took Demerol without permission. She also tried to alter a urine sample to hide it. Those actions cost her the job. In early 2008, the DeVita Dialysis Clinic in Lufkin saw a big rise in patient emergencies. In April alone, 30 calls went out for help. In the 15 months before that, there had been only 2. On April 28, 2008, 2 patients, Marva Rohn and Carolyn Reisinger, had sudden, severe drops in blood pressure. Co-workers Linda Hall and Lurleen Hamilton said they saw Sayans fill syringes with a bleach solution. They said she injected it into the patient's dialysis lines. Investigators noticed she was on duty for every April incident where patients lost their lives. They also checked her computer. They found searches on bleach poisoning and on how to spot bleach in dialysis lines. The surge in emergencies drew in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Chemist Mark Sochaski developed a test for chlorotyrosine, a marker that shows up after bleach exposure. 9 patient samples tested positive, proving bleach entered their bloodstreams. That evidence, along with eyewitness accounts and her internet search history, led to her arrest. She was charged with the most serious offense, causing the loss of a patient. In addition, she faced 3 counts related to causing severe harm to others under her care. Her trial began in March 2012. The prosecution laid out the bleach injections and her online searches. Her defense argued clinic procedures were at fault. After 4 weeks of testimony and 14 hours of jury discussion, she was found guilty. She was convicted of causing the loss of life of 5 patients and of 3 counts of causing serious bodily harm. On April 2, 2012, she received a life sentence with no chance of parole for the loss of life charge. She also got 3 back-to-back 20-year terms for the harm charges. As of May 2025, Kimberly Sayans remains at the Patrick O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas, serving her life sentence without the possibility of parole. The next individual trained to save lives. But what he wanted was something far more disturbing. But before we move on, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. Joseph Michael Swango was born in 1954 in Tacoma, Washington. He was the second of 3 children in a military family. His father, John Swango, served as an officer in the U.S. Army and was a veteran of the Vietnam War. Because of his father's military career, the family moved often. In 1967, they finally settled in Quincy, Illinois. Swango's mother, Muriel, stayed at home to raise the children. Even with the frequent moves, Swango did well in school. He was known to be smart and very driven. He first attended Quincy College, then went on to study at Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. But while in medical school, he started showing signs of troubling behavior. He didn't get along well with others and was known to be extremely competitive. His classmates gave him the nickname 00 Swango, referring to James Bond's license to end lives. They started calling him that because several patients he treated had passed away unexpectedly. The nickname made people uneasy, even though it was meant as a joke. In 1983, Swango began working as an intern at the Ohio State University Medical Center. This is where people started noticing something was seriously wrong. Staff members began seeing more patients getting seriously sick or passing away while under his care. In 1984, he was connected to the case of Cynthia Ann McGee, a 19-year-old gymnast who lost her life after receiving an injection of potassium chloride. Even though he wasn't charged at that time, the incident made hospital staff more suspicious of him. Things got worse in 1985. Swango was working with a paramedic service in Quincy, Illinois. He secretly added ant poison to the food and drinks of several co-workers. 5 people became seriously ill. He was later found guilty of aggravated battery and sentenced to 2 years in prison. He also lost his medical license. Even with this record, Swango found ways to lie about his background and continue working in the medical field. After serving his sentence, he moved to New York. There, he managed to get a medical residency. In 1993, while working at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northport, Long Island, he was linked to the losses of 3 elderly patients. Prosecutors said he gave them harmful substances and then claimed their families had asked not to revive them. In 1995, Swango moved to Zimbabwe and worked at Manene Hospital. Several patients there also passed away under strange and concerning circumstances. In 1997, authorities caught him at a U.S. airport while he was trying to fly to Saudi Arabia. In 2000, Swango pleaded guilty to 3 counts of taking the lives of patients and several counts of fraud. During the trial, prosecutors shared pages from Swango's personal journals. These writings showed that he seemed to enjoy causing harm. In one disturbing entry, he wrote about the sweet, husky, close smell of indoor homicide. Because of the overwhelming evidence, Judge Jacob Mishler gave him 3 life sentences, all to be served one after the other. Swango was 45 years old at the time of his sentencing and will never be released from prison. The next woman told patients everything would be fine, but his voice was the last many would ever hear. Orville Lynn Majors was born in 1961 in Linton, Indiana. He grew up in a humble household. During his teenage years, he spent a lot of time taking care of his grandmother. That experience made him interested in becoming a caregiver. In 1989, he graduated from the Nashville Memorial School of Practical Nursing. Soon after, he started working at Vermilion County Hospital in Clinton, Indiana. Majors left for a short time to work in Tennessee, but returned to the same hospital in 1993. Not long after his return, something strange started happening. The number of patient losses began to rise sharply. Before he came back, the hospital averaged about 26 patient losses per year. But from 1993 to 1995, that number jumped to over 100 each year. A large number of those patients passed away while he was on duty. What made it more alarming was the pattern. Many of these patients were older and had no major health issues when they came in. But during Major's shifts, several of them suddenly had serious heart problems. Some became unstable without warning, even if they were doing fine before. This caused staff members to grow suspicious. In 1995, a nurse supervisor named Dawn Stierek noticed something very concerning. Between 1993 and 1995, 147 patients had passed away. Majors had been working during 130 of those cases. She brought this to the attention of the hospital's leadership, and soon the Indiana State Police got involved. Investigators found that when Majors was on the job, there was an average of one patient passing away every 23 hours. When he wasn't working, that number dropped drastically to about one every 551 hours. Things got even more serious when investigators found medical substances like potassium chloride and epinephrine in his home and vehicle. These medicines can cause sudden heart failure when used in high amounts. Authorities later dug up 15 bodies of patients who had passed during his shifts. None of them had passed due to natural causes. Majors was arrested on December 29, 1997, at his mobile home in Linton. He denied doing anything wrong and blamed the high number of patient losses on his long working hours and natural illness progression. His trial began in 1999 and got national attention. The state focused on 6 specific cases where the evidence was the strongest. Witnesses said Majors gave these patients injections that caused their conditions to suddenly get worse. One emotional example involved Dorothea Hickson. In April 1994, Majors gave her an injection while her daughters were in the room. One daughter remembered him saying, "It's all right, Punkin, it's all right," just before her mother passed away. The jury found Majors responsible in all 6 cases. He was sentenced to 6 separate 60-year prison terms, adding up to 360 years behind bars. Judge Ernest Yelton called his actions deeply disturbing and said, this was the least sentence that made sense based on the situation. Majors was sent to the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. He continued to claim he had done nothing wrong. Over time, people started calling him the Angel of Death because of how many people had passed away under his care. On September 24, 2017, Majors passed away at the age of 56 due to heart-related issues. Next is a woman who studied serial unalivers. Then she became one, hidden in plain sight. In the quiet town of Reynoldsville, West Virginia, Rita Phyllis Mays was born in 1975. She grew up in a rural area. From 2000 to 2004, she served in the West Virginia National Guard and spent time in Iraq and Kuwait. After leaving the military, she worked as a corrections officer at North Central Regional Jail from 2005 to 2012. In 2015, she began work as a nursing assistant at the Louis A. Johnson Veterans Medical Center in Clarksburg, West Virginia, even though she lacked proper certification. Between July 2017 and June 2018, during her overnight shifts, Mays gave 7 elderly veterans too much insulin. Those veterans ranged in age from 81 to 96 and had served in conflicts such as World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. At first, each passing was blamed on natural causes, but staff soon noticed a pattern and asked for a closer look. Investigators discovered that Mays had searched online for female serial unalivers and had watched the Netflix show Nurses Who Kill. They also found phone records showing her complaining to her husband, who was in prison, about her patients. That evidence led to her arrest in July 2020. Later that month, she admitted she was responsible for the 7 passings and that she had tried the same with another patient. At her court hearing in May 2021, U.S. District Judge Thomas Klee said she was the person no one sees coming. He ordered 7 life terms in a row, plus 20 extra years. In her own words, May said she was sorry. She told the court there were no words to comfort the families and that she could only apologize for the harm she caused them and her own family. As of May 2025, Rita May is in prison at the Federal Correctional Institution in Aliceville, Alabama, serving those sentences. Mays admitted targeting veterans with insulin overdoses. But what if the nurse looking after the next two little girls wasn't protecting them at all? In the quiet suburbs of Olathe, Kansas, in the mid-1980s, a disturbing story unfolded. Lorie Lynn Lucas was a nurse. She lived with her partner, Gene Woodside, and Gene's two little girls, Shayna and Shannon. Lucas was in charge of their care. On the evening of July 6, 1986, Lucas dialed 911. She told the dispatcher that Shayna, who was just 18 months old, had slipped underwater in the bathtub. When officers arrived, they saw that Shayna's body was covered in burns, bruises, and cuts. The medical examiner found a severe head injury that led to her passing. Those wounds matched patterns of mistreatment. Investigators then dug deeper. Neighbors and former babysitters spoke up. One babysitter said Lucas made her pour Tabasco sauce down Shayna's throat as a punishment. Another said Lucas would bite Shayna to frighten her, even admitting, "I want to scare her until she cries." Both Shayna and Shannon had been hurt on more than one occasion. Lucas was charged with 2 counts of mistreatment, 1 for each girl, and a serious homicide count in connection with Shayna's passing. In court, the prosecution laid out the history of harm and the extent of Shayna's injuries. The defense claimed some wounds were accidental or part of discipline, but the evidence showed they were deliberate. In 1988, a jury heard all the details and found Lucas guilty on every charge. The judge sentenced her to life behind bars for the serious homicide count, plus extra years for each mistreatment charge. The sentence reflected how deeply she had broken the family's trust and how severe her actions were. Tony Daniel Klein was born in 1984. In 2010, he began working as a licensed nurse at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, Oregon's only prison for women. He wasn't a guard. He didn't carry a baton. He carried a stethoscope and a title that implied trust. His role was to provide medical care to women already facing some of the hardest chapters of their lives. But over time, a different story began to take shape. Klein often met with patients alone, in private rooms, in spaces where the women were vulnerable and he was in control. And it was in these quiet corners of the prison that the first troubling reports began to surface. Between 2013 and 2017, several incarcerated women came forward with allegations that went far beyond poor bedside manner. They said Klein touched them without consent, that he forced them into deeply inappropriate situations, that he used his authority as leverage and threatened them to keep quiet. These were not isolated complaints. The stories shared details that pointed to a pattern. In 2018, the Oregon State Police launched an investigation. Not long after, Klein resigned from his position. But even as he stepped away from the job, the questions didn't go away. If anything, they grew louder. The FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched their own investigations, now with a wider lens. And in March 2022, a federal grand jury formally indicted Klein. He was charged with violating the constitutional rights of his former patients and with lying under oath during legal proceedings. His trial began in July 2023 in Portland, Oregon. 17 women testified against him. They described the fear they felt, the shame, the deep sense of helplessness that came with being violated by someone they were told they could trust. The prosecution argued that having a criminal record does not erase a person's right to safety or dignity, that these women had been taken advantage of, not because they were unreliable, but because their vulnerability made them easy to dismiss. Klein's defense claimed the stories were invented, that the women were looking for financial gain, that without physical evidence, there was no case. But the jury listened. They heard the similarities. They saw the emotional toll. And, in October 2023, they delivered their verdict. Guilty on 21 counts. 17 related to non-consensual intimate conduct. 4 for perjury. Klein was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The judge spoke plainly. This wasn't just a breach of ethics. It was a serious, lasting violation of human rights. And for the women who had spoken up, some after years of silence, it was at least a measure of justice. They had been told their stories wouldn't matter. But in the end, the court proved otherwise.